Hello and welcome back. I hope many of you are return visitors to our Pali class. On behalf of the Buddhist Association of the United States, the Chuanyan Monastery in Carmel, New York, and the Wuju Memorial Library, I'm Stephen Sas, and I'm very happy to be with you once again for another class. This is our 7th of 10 introductory Pali classes this summer. We're moving along quite a bit, and we've moved firmly now into our second textbook, the Giảng and Karuna Tilaka text. And I think it's an exciting time because we are now studying the words of the Buddha, primarily now from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Ones. And so I'm going to now share my screen and call up our file of our reading. Let's see. And so these are our initial readings from Giảng and Karuna Tilaka. And we've discussed much of this in our last session. I'll do a quick review because I think review is always a good choice. Because if you're anything like me, you need to hear things more than once, or perhaps more than twice. And so we did our Going for Refuge, the traditional Pali chanting, the phrases that almost anyone who has visited a Theravadan monastery has heard. And so just a few grammatical, syntactical points to review in this thing. First of all, we have our verb, which typically comes at the end of the sentence, which is in the sort of dictionary form, which is the listing form, gacchati. So remember that in the lists of words, in glossaries, and in dictionaries, we find the verb always listed in the third person singular present tense, unlike in English, for instance. But in this reading, we find it in the first person singular, gacchami. And notice, please, that the A has been lengthened for that first person singular, I go. And the person, the doer, is not listed, is not given in this sentence. It's built into the word, the verb, I go. And as we've spoken about a few times before, the verb of motion will typically take the accusative case to express the destination. And so here we have two accusatives. We have the word sarana, which is the refuge, and we have the word Buddha, which is the type of refuge. We have three refuges here. And so here we see, I go for refuge to the Buddha. Notice how it's expressed as a double accusative, although that's not how we say it in English, but that is the way the Pali grammar is expressed. I go to the Buddha refuge. I go to the Dhamma refuge. I go to the Sangha refuge. And so there's no for here in the Pali. And this is typically said 3 times. And so we have dutiyang, which is the word for secondly, and tatiyang. These words are expressed also in the accusative case, but they're not really objects of a verb. Rather, they have more of an adverbial sense. And adverbs are often expressed in the accusative case. Don't worry about that too much, because this is just something one memorizes, and it's not really necessary to think too closely about the grammar. And I think we could move on now and to our first readings from the Nikayas. And I wanted to point out to you how this might be found in the Pali Canon. If you were to look it up, for instance, on your own, you wanted to say, well, how can I find that in the Anguttara Nikaya? How do I do that? And we've spoken a bit about the Sixth Council website, which is tipitaka.org, which I have here. And maybe I'll try to make this a little bigger. That's making it smaller. Hang on. Here we go. And so here on the left, we have the main folder, which is the entire Sutta Pitaka. We've mentioned before that the canon has 3 pitakas, and this is the one for the sutta. And here we have our typical component parts, the Diga, the Majjhima, the Samyutta, and the Anguttara. And here we have the Book of Ones, Ekaka Nipata Pali. So here, Ekaka is ones, Nipata is book, and Pali is the text. So keep in mind here, when we see Pali, in Pali, tacked on to a phrase or a word, it doesn't mean the in Pali. What it means is the text, because the word Pali means text. So this word means the text of the Book of Ones. And so our reading is in the 4th Adantavagga. And so let me move this over. And here we see our readings from Ger and Karuna in the canon online. And so we probably recognize them, and I wanted to just show you quickly. But of course we have it in our book. And we'll be looking more closely, specifically at 39 and perhaps 40. So let's go back to my file. And so let's review a little bit. We did this together in our last session. And so we have here the sentence, Chittang bhikkhave adantang mahatto anataya sangvatati ti. And so the mind is a very important concept in Buddhism, and it's the first word here in our sentence. And it is a neuter noun, and so it is the neuter nominative ends up with the ung, that M with the dot below. So don't be confused and think it is a short A noun and it may be perhaps the accusative. No, chitta is a neuter noun. There's no chitto. And so it's chittang, the nominative. There are several words in Pali to express the word mind, which in English we don't have such a great variety. And typically in Pali we have more words, and when we translate, we struggle to find enough synonyms. So there's chitta, the mind, and you might recognize that perhaps from one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That's mindfulness of chitta. But there are other words that I just wanted to quickly mention just because it's interesting. So another common word is mana. Maybe I'll type that here. So the word mana, or mano, is another word for mind. Please note it is not this word, mana, which means something like pride or sensuality. It's a completely different word, although it looks very similar. So mano, mind, which is the word that starts off the entire Dhammapada, which is perhaps the most famous collection of Buddhist texts there are. Mano pubangama, right? Mano seta, mano maya. Mind precedes all things. They're mind, led by mind, and mind made. And so here we have another word for mind, which is a rather different word, but we translate it in English the same way. And so you start to understand how if you function only in English, you're missing out in the behind the scenes activities that are happening in the Pali, because we just don't have that many sufficient words to capture all these nuances of mana or chitta. Another word is cheto, or chetas. Cheto, the mind, And we see texts that talk about Cheto Vimutti, liberation of mind. So this is just kind of an aside to sort of talk a little bit about the richness of Pali and the challenges that the translator encounters in trying to translate it into English, and I'm sure that this challenge exists when translating into other languages as well. And so in this sentence, first of all, we might notice our vocative, bhikkhave, and so a bhikkhu is a monk. It's a masculine thing, a masculine noun in the vocative plural. And so, O monks, it is a very, very common word that we encounter in the Pali Canon. And as I mentioned before, often it's not even translated because it can seem sort of overly repetitive to the reader. But it definitely seems as if the Buddha was constantly making sure that his monks were on their toes, keeping up, paying attention, bhikkhave. And so that is our vocative plural. And here we have our subject, the chitta, in the nominative, and it is described with an adjective, adantung, untamed. Notice that the adjective matches the case, number, and gender of the word it is describing or modifying. So in Pali, adjectives are somewhat of free agents. They don't necessarily have their own gender, but they take on the case, number, and gender of the words they are modifying. So this is the untamed mind. Interestingly, I happened to be looking at the dictionary a little bit earlier today, and I saw that in the entry for danta, or the verb damiti, it said there at least that it's related to the English word domesticate, that somehow these words are linked back in ancient times, because as we've said several times, English and Pali are related, linguistically related. And so perhaps domesticated or undomesticated and dantung and adangtung are related words, which is interesting. And perhaps that's another way to help remember what this word means in Pali. And now we have our verb typically found at the end of a sentence, followed by this end of quote marker, ti, which is in fact a shortened version of the word iti, which could mean thus, but it also could just mean end quote, so to speak. And as we spoke about last time, when verbs are ending with vowels right before it, the last letter is lengthened. So this is not an exotic case which you haven't seen before. This is our typical present tense, third person singular, matching with the mind, but the I has been lengthened to probably smooth out the pronunciation of these two words. So instead of saying sangvatati, it's probably easier to say something like sangvatati. And so that is what's happening there. It's a simple thing. The verb sangvatati means leads to, and the verb sangvatati, please remember, takes the dative case as its object. Although it might kind of seem like a verb of motion, it's not in this case. Maybe it's because it's more conceptual. I don't quite know the reason, but I can assure you, sangvatati takes dative. Sangvatati takes dative case. And so we have two datives right before it, mahato and anataya. So anataya is a negated form of atta, which, as we said, has a lot of meanings. In this sentence, it has a meaning of something like benefit. It's negated with the typical short A negator. But since we couldn't just put these two A's together and make it one big A, we have a consonant in between to sort of smooth out the pronunciation to make it look more like a regular word, anataya. And that is also being described with another word from a different class of words which we haven't encountered, which is mahant. But in this case, it's mahato. It's another dative. It's taking that to suffix. Don't worry too much about that. Just know that mahato is a dative, and I believe that is listed in the Ger and Kurunatilica glossary. And then the same thing happens in the reverse. It's interesting to me, perhaps, that the negative one is coming first and the positive one comes second. That is, for some reason, how it was decided to be presented. And then it kind of leads up to number 39 here, where it's all put together in one big phrase. And I'll read that quickly for you. Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamangpi samanupasami yang evang adantang agutang arakitang asangvutang mahato anataya sangvatati yataidang bhikkhave chittang. Chittang bhikkhave adantang agutang arakitang asangvutang mahato anataya sangvatati. So hopefully this doesn't present too many difficulties, because it's the same vocabulary in the most part, kind of collected together with just a few new twists. And the first thing to talk about is probably nahang, which, as we've said, is a combining of two words, which is na, which is a negator, and the first person pronoun ahang, I, na ahang. And so it kind of, instead of saying na ahang, which is a little bit awkward, it gets sort of put together and smoothed out to just nahang. And then we can go to the verb sam anupasami, which we probably recognize at least in part because of the verb pasati. Again, this is first person singular, going with ahang, present tense, prefix with two prefixes, sang and anu. And this is typically translated in English as perceive. And then eka damang pi. So eka is one, dhamma in this case is a thing, and pi is also, it means also or two, but it also can just be simply emphatic, which is almost impossible to translate or capture in English. And anyang is going with eka damang. They match, and it means another. So I do not perceive any other one thing. And then we have a relative pronoun, that which, or perhaps just that. But I tend to like translating the relative pronoun with the word which, because it seems to help differentiate it from the demonstrative pronoun. Evang, thus, and then we have our four words that we know: untamed, unguarded, unprotected, unrestrained. Sangvatati leads to, and here in this olive green color are two datives. Remember, sangvatati takes dative. Great disadvantage. And yata idang, that is to say, or namely. So all this sentence before is being boiled down to one word. Chittang, the mind. Of course, we have to have our bhikkhave. It's the second time in the same sentence. And then it's just restated again in another way, and just for emphasis, I would say. And so that's, I think, what we covered in our last class, and that's 39. And so I'll ask first if there are any questions on this, because it's sort of a repeat before we move on, just to make sure everyone is completely on board with us. So if you do have a question about this specific material that we've covered so far, you may raise your blue hand, and then I will try to answer to the best of my ability your question. So let's see, we have a question already from Rob M. Rob, are you there?
Yes, I am. Quick question. You mentioned that you looked in your dictionary earlier today and you saw that dantai, the verb dantai, was connected to the English word domesticated. What dictionary provides
Good question. Yes. Well, here, of course, at Pali Introduction, we always like to leave our audience wanting more. No, but it's a very good point. And I intend to either this class or probably the next class have a whole sort of segment on using the dictionary, because I think that using the dictionary is a very important part of being a Pali student, and knowing how to use dictionaries is like a whole thing. And I will be talking about that at some length. But thank you for your question. It's a good one.
So was it the PTS dictionary or some other
Yes,
dictionary?
it is the online PTS dictionary.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And now we have Vipul.
Yeah, hi Stephen. My
Hi.
question was regarding uh, negation. So na aham, this is with a noun, but with a verb also, it comes before the verb or after the verb.
Well, ahang is not a noun, it's a pronoun. It's a personal
Yeah,
pronoun.
it's a pronoun. Okay.
I guess it could work with verbs as well, but I'm typically now here talking about pronouns and nouns, this a negator. I guess I can't quite think of an example off the tip of my tongue, but I would say probably it could be working with verbs, but I'm not sure. We'll have to see what comes up. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
And then one more question. We'll take one more question from E.S.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi. Actually, I trying to make it sound. This is like a relevant to the Avanda Vago is 40, number 40, which is a the gear in English. I think the Pali is right, but the the interpretation is something is off. That is what I believe. Can you check it? Because this is Saham Beku Anam Ikadamampi Samanupasami Yan Ibandatan Godam Rakitan Sapudam Mahato Anat Ataya Samavadadi Yada Yidan Sitan Beku Dandam Gudam Rakitan Sampudam Mahato Ataya Sambaditi, correct? So monk, I don't perceive any single phenomenon other than that lead to such great well-being. Supposed to be that way, but in the gear is a kind of a interpreting is I think it missing something because
Okay, hold on. Let me just, why don't we just look at the ger together, okay? So
okay.
I'll take your question by looking together at the ger, which kind of opens up a big subject, which I can only lightly address here, which is the translation as a whole subject. So let's look here together, okay? I don't perceive any single phenomenon. So that's anya, that is anyang ekadamang,
Yes.
that leads to such great well-being. So I don't see a problem here.
If it in the English translation there is no other than lead to such, so if without the other than, that will be a meaning will be a different.
Well, perhaps not to me, but perhaps you speak a slightly different version of English that I'm not used to. But when I don't perceive any single thing, I think that is pretty exclusive. But I think we'll have to leave it there.
So that's mean, Stephen. So that means I don't perceive any single phenomenon which is a tame mind, guarded mind, protected mind, restrained mind. That is the correct words. Or I don't perceive any single things other than which lead to tame, guarded, protected mind, and restrained mind.
Yeah, I think the Ger translation is okay.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you. All right, and now I'd like to ask if there's any brave soul who'd like to volunteer without perhaps even preparing to do number 40, which is on my screen, because it is almost exactly the same except in the reverse. And so I see it. We have Hitet, who has raised his hand. Are you there?
Yes.
Yes. Do you see my screen? Can you see number 40?
Yes. Yes, Stephen.
Okay, great. Then would you please, if you could, then read us the two sentences and provide your translation.
Sure, Stephen. Naham bhikkhave anya ekadhammampi samanupasami yan evam dantam kuddam rakhitam samvuttam mahato athaya samvadati yathayidam bhikkhave chitta. Naham, like not me, I do not. Bhikkhave, O monks, inyan, any other. Ekadhammampi, this is the accusative. Eka is like one, dhamma is thing, P is the emphasis.
Yes.
Samanupasami, I do not perceive, I do not see. Yan is like the relative, relative.
Good.
Evam is thus. And then it comes all the adjectives.
Yes.
Dantan is like tamed, Kotan guarded, Rakitan protected, Samvotan restrained.
Yes.
And that this leads to the verb Samvatati, that is, which leads to.
Good.
And then the dative comes, Samvutam.
No, not Samvutam.
Mahato, yeah. Sorry, not Samvutam. Mahato Athaya. Great benefits.
Very good.
And which is Chittan, the mind.
Very good. And go on, please.
And then it comes, thank you. And then it goes on, the second sentence, Chittam bhikkhave dantam kuddam rakitam samvutam mahato athaya samvatati ti dassama.
Don't worry about that. I'll explain that in a second.
Yeah. So chitta is the nominative singular in this case.
Good.
And the verb is at the end, samvatati, leads to. And then the modifiers to chittam, dantam, kuddam, rakitam, samvutam. Dantam is tamed, kuddam is guarded, rakitam is protected, samvutam is restrained. So guarded, protected, tamed and restrained mind, samvatati leads to the dative mahato athaya, great benefit. Ti is like the quotation marker.
Exactly. Perfect. Excellent. Bravo. Thank you so much. So let me just mention a couple of things. This dasamang is not part of the text. It's sort of a housekeeping thing in the text overall. It just means this is the 10th phrase, the 10th mini sutta. And so before we have Navamang, the 9th, Attamang, the 8th, Sattamang, the 6th, or 7th, and 6th, going back all the way to 1. So that is not important to our discussion here. And let me just say, because there were a few questions about the importance of punctuation, and different people put different punctuators in their text. And so here we have the quote marks, and quote marks even before the T, and we have plenty of periods and commas. So please don't be nervous that it's going to be just a giant undifferentiated block of Pali. There are typically many periods and commas and quotation marks and all of that punctuation. Okay, so let me just ask Diane if there were any other people on YouTube that might have a question.
I don't see any questions yet.
Not one question.
Not one question.
Okay. And I see one more hand. Is this a question from Fiatra?
No, sorry, I just wanted to participate. I should lower it down.
Okay, no problem. Then we can move on. Let me get back to my text. Now, moving on to a different book, a different part of the book, I should say. This would actually be 298 in a different section, which would be number 16. So I'll read it first. Micha ditikasa bhikkhave anupana cheva akusala dhamma upajanti upanacha ukas akusala dhamma vepulaya sangvatanti. And so we have a big long compound word, looks slightly daunting on the page. to start off this sentence, but if we look at it closely, we'll see it really is quite easy to understand. And I'll break it up into its sort of component parts, which are 4, I think. So miccha is, I think, on the indeclinable. It means wrong. It is the opposite of samma, right or correct. Samma ditti, right view. Miccha ditti, wrong view. So of course, if something has the right view, there must be the wrong view too. The ka suffix makes it what's probably an ancient noun. It's the suffix which makes it a person. So in a literal sense, this compound means a wrong doer, a wrong viewer. Ditti, maybe I just should have said, is related to our verb pasati. As I've said several times, the root of that is drish. And I think the Sanskrit equivalent of ditti would be drishti. And so ditti in Pali, view, because view is related to seeing. But of course, this is a more, we might say, philosophical kind of seeing. It's not a visual with the eye seeing. And then this is must be our dative suffix, sa. So, for one of wrong view, or for a wrong viewer, bhikkhave, of course, we have to have our requisite bhikkhave, O monks. And then we have interesting things going on here. We have this cheva. And so I should talk a little bit about the word cha, which is and, which is a very simple word, but is worth a bit of a discussion in Pali because it happens quite differently in English than it happens in Pali, or vice versa. So cheva is the emphatic word eva, which means indeed, with the cha joined together, and so it becomes cheva. And often I put, and many people will put this apostrophe to help us understand. We're looking at this kind of joined together words. And so, but that being said, let's set it aside for a moment. And we talk about upajanti. That is, of course, a plural, and it's going with dhamma, things. And so maybe, or even maybe we'll just try to leave it untranslated for now. And the word dhamma is described by 2 adjectives which are matching in the nominative plural, unupanna, so unarisen, that is a negated, and akusala, unwholesome. Sometimes the word kusala is translated as skillful. It could be that too, or wholesome, perhaps on the context. I tend to lean towards wholesome very often. It could also be skillful. And then we have, so far we have, for one of wrong view, O monks, unarisen, unwholesome dhammas arise. And, we'll talk about that in a second, unwholesome dhammas lead to fullness. That's the dative here, or expansion. So let's put this aside for a second, and I want to talk a little bit about the word cha, because it is worth discussing. Oh, it's not this file, it's this one. No, it's this one. And so here, you perhaps have seen it in the Gere book. The cha and the va, which means or, are what it says here, are repeated with each element conjoined. If you're a regular person and not a grammarian like me, that might leave you a little confused, so I'll explain it in a slightly easier way. And so, in English perhaps, if I were to say, I am very thankful for the help of Diane and Regina and Kaiti, that's how I would end my sentence. But in Pali, the cha which would be the and, would be coming at the end also. And so in Pali, I would have to say, I am very thankful for the help of Diane and Regina and Kaiti and. And so first of all, there's that and at the end, which seems weird. And the same thing happens for va. So here we have basati va or karoti va. So whether one says or does or. So notice here the or repeated at the end. So that's a sort of a characteristic of the Pali language. And I'm sure that other languages have this quality as well. I've been told that Japanese does this. Completely different, unrelated language. So it's not unique to Pali. And so we have another example here. Sachang cha damang cha. So that, well, slightly confusingly, they reverse the meanings of the words, but sacha is truth. So truth and doctrine and. So notice here, the cha comes at the end. And now, this third example, brahmanasa cha putto gahapati kasa cha. So we probably recognize this is maybe going back a second to Pali Primer, this genitive, Brahman's son, and so Gahapati is a householder, or at least that's how it's typically translated into English. And it sort of means a lay person, not a monastic. But notice here that this cha is kind of right in the middle, which is not, doesn't make any sense from an English language point of view, because it would literally mean a Brahman's and son, householders and. But so in English we would have the cha in a different place, not in these places at all. And so that's what I mean by we have to get a little used to the usages of the cha and the va, namely in places we might not expect to find them in English. And so that could be a slight stumbling block, but hopefully not too big of one. So notice here, the first cha comes between the two adjectives which are describing Dhamma, and it's entirely unnecessary in English. We would not translate it because there's no comparison yet, because and or there's nothing being referred to yet. And so this first cha is actually, we might say, reflected back for a grammatical reason back into the sentence, but is not translatable in this position. And it would only be in the second clause, and we would find it right after my comma here. But here, again, it's being located, we find it located between the two adjectives. And so that is the tricky that we have to just we get used to it, and it just takes a little bit of time to understand what these cha, why they are where they are, and how to translate them. And the typical thing that seems slightly confusing is that the first one is reflected back, as I said, but we don't really need to translate it. It wouldn't make sense if we translated into English. Perhaps in other languages it's easier, but this is the sort of difference between English and Pali's use of these conjunctions. So this is 298, and then maybe I'll look again. I'll move on to 300 first, and I'll read it. And here we have vas. Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamangpi samanupasami yena anupanava kusala dhamma nupajanti upanava kusala dhamma parihayanti yataidang bhikkhave michaditti kassa bhikkhave anupanna cheva kusala dhamma napujanti upanna cha kusala dhamma parihayanti. So it sounds like quite a mouthful, but in fact it's kind of a repeat of what we've been looking at with only a few new words. And so we have our familiar at this point, nahang, I do not perceive any other one thing, or perhaps another thing. And now we have this relative pronoun, as I hope you recognize in the instrumental, by which unarisen, wholesome dhammas. Notice here the va, I didn't translate it because it's a reflected back kind of thing. It wouldn't make sense to translate it here. Nupajanti. So this is a joining together of the n plus upajanti. They do not arise because it's plural, because dhamma is plural. And then here I would put in English my va, my or. But notice again, as I've said, it comes between the two adjectives. Or arisen wholesome dhammas decrease, namely monks' wrong view. For one of wrong view, O monks, unarisen wholesome dhammas do not arise, and, so I put the and there, arisen wholesome dhammas decrease. So I hope that's clear, and I would like to ask a volunteer to do that one again for us. And if somebody would raise their hand and like to do the very same one. Okay, we have Fyatra quick on the button. Are you there?
Yes, hi, thank you. Okay.
So we're going to do together now 300, and I would just ask you to do it quite slowly, so I'll try to highlight the words you were translating
Okay.
on the screen. But first, just read the first sentence in Pali, just for practice.
Okay, so Nahang Bhikkhave Anyang Ekadamampi Samanupasami Yena Anupana Va Kusala Dhamma Nupajanti. Upana Va Kusala Dhamma Parayihanti Yatayedam Bhikkhave Michadati.
Good, very good. And so how would you translate that?
So I do not, and then the verb is perceive samanupasami. Okay, anyam ekadampi, one any other thing or anything other than this, by which yena, then anupana unarisen kusala, which is wholesome things do not arise, nupajanti.
Good.
And then on the other hand, upana va kusala, that's the arisen vakusala dhamma, that's the arisen wholesome things.
Good. So no, just to interrupt, you're doing great. We would put the va right before the upana.
Yeah.
We would move it over into English, as you did, I think. Very good. Please continue.
Great. Pari hayanti. So that is the to decrease.
Yes.
Very good. Yataidam. Yataidang. Sorry. Because that is to say, amongst michadati, wrong view.
Excellent. Now please read the second sentence.
Okay. Michadati kasa bhikkhave anupana cheva kusala dhamma nupajanti upana cha kusala dhamma parihayanti.
Yes. Yes.
So two of the one that has wrong view, amongst the unarisen, both the unarisen wholesome things do not arise. And
good. That's where the and goes. Very good.
Excellent. Yeah. And the arisen wholesome things diminish.
Yes, exactly. Well done. Thank you. So we have I hope that's clear to you now. And perhaps we could ask now for another volunteer, or if there's a very pertinent question to this translation that is not clear, you can raise your hand for that as well. So otherwise we're going to do 301. So I see we have Jillian. I hope I've pronounced that right. Jillian? You're muted, I'm afraid. There you go.
You pronounced that beautifully.
Thank you. I've been working on it.
I've been working on Pali.
So are you asking me a question, or would you like to do 301?
I'd like to have a go at 301 when you're ready.
I'm ready. Lay it on me. But just go slowly for me, please.
Nahang bikave anyang ekadamam angpi samanupasami yena anupana va akusala dhamma nupajjanti panava akusala dhamma parihayanti yata yidang bhikkhave samaditi.
That's right. And what does that mean in English?
It's I don't something, and if I look for the verb, I will find it as perceive in samanupasami.
That's right. So it has those three pieces. Sam, anu, pasami.
Samanupasami.
Right.
Yeah, I don't perceive monks, any one thing or anything other yena than, and
Or
that's
let's do a little bit more as an instrumental flavor. That by which?
By which. Yes, that's what I've written down. Ha.
Oh, good.
By which unarisen or.
Well, don't put the or now.
Yes,
not in English.
Yes, yeah. Unarisen, unskillful things don't arise.
Good. Now I'm waiting for the or. Bravo.
Arisen, unskillful things decrease.
Good.
Namely, monks' right view.
Bravo. And could you continue then?
Oh. Samadhitikasa bhikkhave anupana cheva akusala dhamma nupajjanti upanacha akusala dhamma parihayanti.
Nice. You're finding your Pali legs well. Very good. Please tell us what that all means anyway.
Right view.
There's a little more to it than that.
Oh, yes. No, one who holds right view.
Yeah, what case is that?
It's dative or genitive, and I think it's probably... I got very tied up with the datives around here.
It's dative, as you say.
It's dative.
For one of wrong view, for a wrong viewer.
I really don't understand why it's dative.
Well, because this is happening for that person. And so if something's happening for something or to something, this is happening to that person or for that person, it's expressed in the dative.
Okay, thank you.
So these things arise for that person. It's sort of an indirect object.
Unarisen, unwholesome things don't arise, and
good. And we could maybe stick in the Ava to be fancy. Indeed.
Yes, and indeed arisen and...
No. Don't say that and there.
No, sorry. I've said it.
Retract that "and," please.
And indeed, arisen, unwholesome things diminish.
Very good. Thank you. I noticed you sort of toggled between skillful and wholesome. As a professional translator, you probably want to stick to one per sentence, but I understand that you're keeping your options open, and that's fine. So thank you very much.
I've reached professional status.
You're doing very well. You're doing great. Okay, I see we have a question here from Sherosha.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
I just had, like, with the same point that Jillian brought up, I don't quite understand why it's not genitive, because if it's as someone having wrong view, isn't it kind of like they're possessing something, so it's in the possessive sense, as one having wrong view or one having right view. I'm on the fence on that. I'm not sure which one.
Well, I understand that. I understand that confusion entirely. It's very normal. And perhaps we can say it's dative genitive, because as we've been saying, dative and genitive are very close, and they almost always share the same case ending, which leads to the so-called ambiguity. But really what it means is that there's just a very fine line, and sometimes, as we've said, it's almost impossible to say which one it is. And so I would say, for now at least, if you know it's dative genitive and you know what the meaning is, well, then don't even stress too much about trying to say, but wait, is it dative? Is it genitive? I'm taking it as a sort of indirect object. So these dhammas are arising for that person. And so that for, I would read as a dative. And I would not say of that person, which would be more of a genitive to me. But maybe we'll be just safe and equivocate a little bit and say genitive. Okay?
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're fine. Okay, and one more question from Pat.
I just like to ask a quick question about the word upana.
Upana, yes.
So there's upana and anupana, and there's like this sort of dance of positive versus negativity that goes on, and I'm perplexed as to whether upana is supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing. Is it like, I assume it's tied to dependent origination or one of these ideas, but is it, I'm trying to figure out how is it being evaluated, because we have anupana akusala, which akusala is unskillful, but then later we have upana akusala, and I think I'm missing something.
Okay, but maybe not. Maybe it's actually even easier than you think. So I would say that upana is related, of course, to the verb upajati. It means arisen. It's an adjective. So again, upana means arisen. If it's prefixed by un, it means unarisen. They haven't appeared. They don't exist. Unarisen. And this is all relating to perhaps the 4 right strivings, which we're going to come up to in a minute. And so I wouldn't overthink it too much. Upana means arisen, and anupana is unarisen. So of course, as a Buddhist practitioner, we probably want unwholesome things not to arise, and we want wholesome things to arise. And so it sort of depends on how it's paired, whether anupana is good or bad. So anupana could be good if it's talking about rage, but it probably is bad if it's talking about altruism. Okay. So it doesn't have in itself, we might say, a value. It just means arisen or unarisen. Okay? You're welcome. Okay. And now we can maybe move on to, this is the 4th reading in the initial readings of chapter 1. And all 4, as the footnote, I hope you saw, says, should be prefixed by the word bhikkhu, a monk. Of course, this should probably be a period. It could be for anybody. It doesn't have to be for a monk, but that's how we see it presented in the Pali Canon very often. And so here we have 2. We have upana and upada. So those are slightly different too. These are a little bit of a tongue twister sometimes. And so I'll read this first one. Bhikkhu anupananang papakanang akusalanang dhammanang anupadaya chandang janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati padahati. And so here we'll start with our subject, a monk, and then I would jump right to the verb. I would just leap over all this stuff for now and go right to janeti, generates, which sounds to me, at least, as a similar kind of word. Chanda, desire. And that is the direct object. So a monk generates desire. So if anyone tells you there's no desire in Buddhism, you can just point them to this very sutta. So a monk generates desire, anupadaya, so for the non-arising, that's dative, of, and I think these are genitive, anupananang, of unarisen, unwholesome, unwholesome dhammas. So these would be genitive plural. Let's do that again. I know this could be a little bit obscure on a first try. So a monk, bhikkhu, generates desire for the non-arising of, unarisen, evil, unwholesome dhammas. So notice how I don't say the word of for every word. They're all going together sort of as a pack, as a group. And then we have vayamati, he endeavors or he strives. And then we have viryam arabati, he arouses energy. And then also chittang paganhati, he directs his mind or he applies his mind. And padahati, which has a very similar, almost identical, to, seems to me, sense as vayamati. So he strives. And so we, as I've said earlier in this class, very often in Pali we'll have a string of words which seem very related, and we sometimes have to struggle a little bit in English to kind of differentiate them, to find enough synonyms in English, because it would seem as if the Pali is a little bit richer in that way. We have to struggle a little bit. We have to strive to try to render these words in different ways. And it would seem that the Buddha, when he said these things, he was trying very hard to kind of cover all options to make this abundantly clear, that there was no way this could be misconstrued. And so that is the first one of 4. I would like to ask if there would be a volunteer to do the second one. Okay, we have Sachini.
Hello.
Hi, I hear you
Hi.
fine. So
Hi.
let's do together the second one. And first, please just read it in Pali. So you don't have to read my green thing. That is just a sort of a glossary to help us.
Okay. Bhikkhu uppannānaṁ pāpakānaṁ akusalaṇaṁ dhammānaṁ pahānāya chandang janeti vayamati viryang arabati chittang paganhati padahati.
Very good. So what does that mean in English? Tell me.
So bhikkhu means monk, and then the verbs, there's several words. So generates desire, chandang.
So what case is chandang, by the way?
It's accusative.
Good.
Yeah. Generates desire for, so pahanaya is a dative singular.
Good.
For the diminishing of, the deteriorating of, of
Yes.
arisen, sinful, papakana,
Okay.
unwholesome,
Hmm.
and then this would be like things,
Yes, so those first three words are describing this word.
adjectives. Yeah.
Exactly right. Dhammas. I've been sort of cheating a little bit by using the word dhamma, as you noticed. Things, mental objects. It's hard
Yes.
to render. Yes, you're excellent. You're excellent. Please go on.
So then the other verbs would be something like endeavors,
Mm-hmm.
and then viryang arabati would be begins effort or begins
Maybe energy.
begins
Arouses energy.
arouses energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then chittang paganhati would be directs the mind,
Yes.
and padhati would be strives.
Very nice. Thank you very much. I hope that was clear.
Okay, I have a small question.
Please.
In that, it's similar to before. The dhammanang, in what case is that?
Well,
That
you
would
notice
be-
that, yes, all these four, upananang, papakanang, akusalanang, adamanang, what case? Well, you tell me. What do you think?
I thought it was in genitive case.
Genitive singular?
Genitive plural.
Exactly, I think so too. So that would be represented with the English word of, but it's plural.
Yeah.
So we have the anang suffix. Right.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your great work. Diane, may I ask if there are any YouTube things that I need to know about at this time?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, Diane, would you like to do one?
Ha! No, thank you.
No, you decline.
I decline.
Oh, okay. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken in this class yet who would like to do number 3? I see a hand, but that's I think somebody who has spoken. And I'd like to encourage people who haven't. Okay, we have one now. Skylar.
Hello.
Hi. Would you do for us the third one? First,
3.
please read it in Pali.
Okay. Bhikkhu anupananum kusalanum damananum upadaya chandam janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittam paganhati padahati.
So it's Vayamati, Viryam, Arabati, Chittam, Paganhati, Padahati. Okay, so what does this say?
Okay, so a monk, bhikkhu, generates a desire, chandam janeti, for the arising, upadaya, of unarisen, wholesome things.
Yes, and what case are those 3 words in, please?
That's genitive plural.
Right, and go on then after our semicolon.
And then it's what strives, arouses energy. Now I forget. Makes ready his mind.
Okay.
And exerts, strives.
Yes. Okay, good. So that's another right effort. So I hope the gentleman who asked earlier about the arisen and unarisen things, which was a good question, it's kind of becoming clearer now. And so here's the fourth one. When I sent this out, I had all my sort of glosses in there to help, but maybe we'll look at it without them too. Let's see if I could try to do this myself. And so the fourth one of the 4, Bhikkhu upananang kusalanang dhamanang titiya asamosaya bio bhavaya vipulaya bhavanaya paripurya chandang janati vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati padahati. And so here a monk once again generates desire, and so here pari, and then maybe we could take it in order. For the persistence, right? Then it would be for the non-confusion. And then these two I always find slightly tricky because they seem very similar, but Biobhavaya would have the sense of increase, and Vepulaya has the sense of fullness or expansion, and then Paripurya, yeah, I've actually have to look that one up. I'm afraid Paripurya. For the fulfillment or the completion of unarism, wholesome mental states. He generates desire. We have had that. He strives. He arouses energy. He applies his mind, and he makes an effort. So those are the 4 of the right strivings. So they look at things in different ways. And that's, I think, the end of our readings for the first initial readings. And this is from the chapter 18, which is called the finger snap, or the further finger snap chapter. So unless there are any questions about this initial readings, I would like to, in our last few minutes, have an initial look at the further readings, which look a lot similar. So I don't see any questions. So then I can go on to further. And we'll be uploading this into our website, so you'll have this file. I hope you all have found the John Kelly answers. I hope you have found it useful, at least as a reference point. I'm sure there are other places one can look for translations of Anguttara Nikaya. And so let's do maybe 1 or 2 of these. And so, unless we have a volunteer, maybe I should ask, is there a brave person who has prepared this who would like to do it for us? And then I could sort of point out the words. Okay, we have a person. We have Sharosa. Are you there?
Hello?
Yes,
Okay.
I hear you.
Okay.
Good. So it's nice to have more than one reader. So would you read for us the first sentence?
Just read it out? Okay.
Just read out the Pali, please.
Naham bhikkave anyam eka dhammam pi samana passami yo evam sadammassa samosaya antaradhanaya samvatati yata idam bhikkave pamado.
Good. So notice here a couple of things. We have the yo, which is the relative pronoun going with pamado, which is a masculine noun. Notice here also that the word pamado, which is translated often as something like heedfulness or diligence, is the positive word, but it is often negated as uppamada. We'll see that in the next sentence. So my point here is that the negated form of a word is not always the negative word. And so we have to be careful about that. Okay, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you then now please give us your English translation of that first sentence?
Okay, I'll try this. So I do not know, O monks, any single thing which I think
yes.
Is which, I guess, in this context. Samanupasami yo evam, that I perceive.
Wait, what is the evam?
Evam is thus.
Yes, and then go to the verb.
Which is samvatati.
So what does samvatati mean?
Samvatati is okay. I'm lost. I don't know what samvatati.
It means leads to.
Yes, leads to. Sorry.
And what case does samvatati take as its object? Leads to.
Leads to.
to?
The sadamasa?
No, but just tell me which case. Forget about the vocabulary for a second. Which case does the word for lead, the verb lead to, which case does that take?
So it's the singular? Like, what do you mean? Like, so singular.
Is it locative? Is it accusative? Which case is it? Okay, Sangvatati takes the dative case.
Okay.
Sangvatati takes dative, and that's what we see here with this aya. This aya suffix. What cases has this aya suffix?
So the aya suffix is the dative case.
It's right. So it leads to, what does it lead to?
So the
what is antaradanaya?
Antaradanaya. The disappearance of the true.
Well, it means disappearance. To the disappearance. And what is samosaya? To the what?
Samosaya is.
What's samosa? It's not a delicious Indian food, samosa. It's something else here. It's the confusion.
Confusion, yes. Confusion.
Of, what case is this? Probably it's genitive.
Genitive of the true doctrine.
Yes, the Saddhamma, the true Dhamma.
The true doctrine.
So let me translate just this piece first again, okay? Hold on. Monks, I do not perceive any other one thing which thus leads to the disappearance, the confusion of the good Dhamma, the true doctrine. And then please go from yata idang. What does that mean?
Yata, namely, O monks.
Yeah.
As sloth, I guess, laziness.
No, it's not sloth really, but it's heedlessness or diligence.
Oh, I see. Okay. So
no, it's. I'm sorry. I got mixed up because of what I just said. It's the negative one. So it's heedlessness. Sorry, or lack of diligence.
Lack of diligence.
Yes. So go on for the second sentence. Read that sentence.
So pamado bhikkhave sada massa samosaya antaradanaya samvatati.
Mm-hmm.
So he's again stating heedlessness, O monks.
Yes.
And samvatati leads to.
Which case does it take?
So this is the dative.
Very good.
Samvatati. So that's so it leads to the confusion.
That's samosaya.
The samosaya. So the disappearance.
That's antaradanaya, right?
Okay, sorry, my grammar is okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And one more word of
the disappearance of the confusion and the disappearance of the true doctrine or teaching.
Yes, that's right. So heedfulness, O monks, leads to the disappearance. Heedlessness. I'm getting this backwards. It's heedless. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Heedlessness, the lack of paying attention, leads to the disappearance and the confusion of the true Dhamma. Thank you. Very good. Okay. I think maybe we'll leave it there. And so I'd like you for Wednesday to prepare the rest of these sentences, which are all rather similar, I think, except for, let me take a look in the book, and I will place the scan of the glossary list in case there are words that you don't know. And so don't be alarmed by the volume of these further readings, because they are very similar, except for a few words that have been plugged in differently. It's sort of a vocabulary builder. And I'll ask one more time if there are any questions about anything that we've covered so far in this class. I've noticed here looking in the book that pamada is translated as sloth, but I have to say I don't really love that. I think indolence may be okay, but that's not a word I would use in my normal day English. And so heedlessness is perhaps better. Okay, I don't see any questions. And so we'll end it here. And I thank you all for your attention and your energy and your chittang paganhat and all those good things. Thank you for your right survivings. And I hope to see you all again on Wednesday for our next, or perhaps sometimes for you it's Thursday morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stephen.
Okay, bye now.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.